In a large casino, they are all afraid of the existence of a kind of person, that is, a fortune teller, and our male host Dick is the top fortune teller. All he's ever played is poker. In Dick's eyes, all the people on the table are fresh leaks. That group of people, including the dealer, can tell from his black and white hair that he's been through a lot. On this day, he took a 100-yen chip to the table and silently wrote down the names of all the people on the field. Calculate the probability of your victory. If the probability of victory is low, he will point to the smallest chip. If the probability of victory is high, he will take out half of the chip. The main thing is that he never goes up to follow in Soha because Dick understands that no matter how high the probability of winning is, there is always a probability of losing. In his accurate calculation, in just half an hour, $100 was doubled by him. Dick found that the dealer had noticed that he was still standing up in the face of objective retention. He knew that he would be in some unnecessary trouble if he continued to be greedy. And these are just a little appetizer for him. What really made him able to make money and get out of it was his extreme self-discipline and his sharp insight. He drove his own sports car and lived in a hotel with the money he made. As soon as he entered the hotel, he packed everything in the room, opened the suitcase, and wrapped everything up with a white cloth, because before he went into the room, he saw the coffee cup in front of him that hadn't been cleaned yet, which made the neat Dick unbearable. After packing up everything, he took out his notebook and reviewed the whole process of playing cards today to sum up the experience, because people who play against each other will be different, which also made him accustomed to it. The next day, Dick came to another casino and met a friend soon after he walked in. Although his friend wanted to play with Dick, but he thought that his friend's mentality was changing too much, and winning or losing would show up on his face. This would affect the whole atmosphere of the game, so he didn't take him with him. At night, under the introduction of this friend, Dick met a behind-the-scenes specialist. Mary invited Dick to participate in the National Championship of German Poker. Mary is responsible for the original funds, and then the money earned by the two of them is divided into 5 and 5. But Dick firmly refused Mary's request because he was very clear. Once the game is lost, what he faces is not only a loss of freedom, but also a lifelong service for the casino. Mary thinks Dick is her own first horse, so she's not in a hurry to let Dick think about it. Not long after Mary left, Dick killed 4 people on the table, but after earning enough profit, he got up and left the field as usual. Then I heard that there was a lecture going on upstairs, and he came upstairs and saw that the host was his old boss. He couldn't help but go in and see what the old boss was doing. Dick got up and left because he was bored. A young man named John gave him a card and told him that he had something very important to talk to him. At night, Dick called John on the phone based on the card and met at the bar. John was a little scared, but he still said that he was investigating Dick, and he asked Dick to help him pay the bill and get rid of Ken. John's father used to be a colleague of Dick and used to work in Guantanamo prison, but John's father was sentenced to prison for Ken. Not long after being released from prison, he cut himself off because of the pressure, which led to John not being able to go to school. Their family was also heavily indebted. John thought it was all because of Ken, so he found his father's former colleague, Dick, and hoped he could help get rid of Ken. But what surprised John was that Dick refused John's request directly because he had been locked up in a military prison before, and he knew that Ken had a lot of power, and he didn't want to be the head of this place. However, in the middle of the night, Dick saw Guantanamo prison again in his dream. In the prison, all prisoners were tortured by non-humans. The prisoner's head was put on his headgear, and he stood on 2 wooden planks. One day, he was kneeling on the ground, and not only was he tortured by the prison guards, even the prisoners on the side had to cheer up, and the female soldiers were not good at it. After ordering the prisoner to take off his clothes, he grabbed the prisoner's body with his hands, and even the military power inside became a tool for them to commit murder. It was in such a high intensity and perverted environment that Dick's personality was completely created. Later, because his boss wanted to retire safely, he sued Dick in a military court and sent him to a military prison. He didn't have a good time in prison. After he was released, Dick became even more cold-blooded. This also made him the ultimate fortune teller and began his wandering life in front of the casino. And it was John's request to remind Dick of the hellish scene in Guantanamo prison. Out of anger, he decided to help John's family pay off their debts and persuade John to give up the revenge plan. That night, Dick took John to the casino to find Mary and said that he wanted to participate in the Texas Poker Championship. Mary, who knew about John's debt, happily provided him with a match. The game just started, and Dick pretended to be a novice and kept sending money to the casino. At the final moment of victory, all the chips were easily selected for the 5th place, entering the semifinals. In fact, with his ability, he was able to easily get the 1st place. And the reason why he hid it was because he didn't want to attract too many people's attention. Mary also saw the hidden meaning of it and determined that Dick was the one she was looking for. But John, on the other hand, was a little confused and asked Dick why he didn't get the 1st place. He explained to John that before gambling, never let others see that you are the smartest person, because this will cause trouble, only to get the profit that should belong to you. The one who leaves in time is the final winner. At the semifinals, Dick changed his attitude and remembered the cards of each player. At his highest point, Dick abandoned the cards in his hand and lost half of the chips, and everyone else thought he was a rookie. When he showed his teeth, Dick pretended to be small and attracted other people to the hook. As a result, he managed to get 2 opponents off the table. Dick looked at the guy in front of him and knew that he was not his opponent, so he calculated according to the number of points. Although he knew that his cards could easily crush the guy, he still chose to shrink all his chips and hug the guy. But when the dealer was going to continue to play, Dick was determined to play the 2nd place in the semifinals and advance to the finals. Although it was the 2nd place in the semifinals, it still had a reward of 50,000 yen. After the end, he and Mary shared half of the money, and at the end of the game, Dick admitted defeat because he had his own unique idea. Anyone who makes it to the finals is not an ordinary person, and they all go for the 1st place in the semifinals. If he wants to be the final winner, then he has to hide a certain amount of money so that everyone will ignore his power. After all this, Dick also took John to his own military prison to confirm some things, invite him in to visit, but the timid John refused Dick's invitation. This also made Dick more sure of his thoughts. Soon after, Dick came out of the military prison and found John sunbathing next to him. I didn't expect John to take out his phone and show it to Dick. He found his own home, and even though he was so timid, he still couldn't forget the revenge. This also made Dick feel a little angry, and he always felt that John would bring trouble for himself. At night, Dick brought John to a casino. Today, he is very different from his usual style, and he plans to quickly get $80,000 and hand it over to John. Under his careful calculation, he won $80,000 in no time. Dick called John to his hotel and let him sit in front of him, then slowly opened the bag that came with it, which was full of tools for killing. This scared John, and when he was about to run away, he was caught back on the bed by Dick. He stared at John with murderous intent, took out his surgical gloves, and gave John 2 choices. The first is to take $100,000 back home to pay off the debt for the family, or he killed John right here to prevent him from seeking revenge, because even if he let John go, he would be killed according to his timid personality. This will not only involve John, but also himself. In the face of the murderous intent of Dick, he dared not resist and chose $100,000. After solving all this, Dick felt at ease for a while. He found Mary and took a walk in the park with her. Under the dazzling neon lights, he and Mary also had a love affair. They spent the night together. However, he did not expect that the next morning, Dick received a text message from John. The picture on the text message is that he finally understood the bad food. Even if he repeatedly told John to give up revenge, he still chose this path of death, but he still decided to let John kill himself. Dick came to the Texas Poker Championship to play against a group of masters. The guy who played with him before was very bad, and he eliminated an opponent in the first round. And because of John's influence, he was a little distracted in the whole game. He even forgot to remember the opponent's card. In the second round, he just left the table and chose to let the dealer bet for him. After returning to the hotel, he turned on the TV and received the news that he was most reluctant to see John was attacked at the door of Kent's house and was finally killed by Kent. The police also judged that Kent was in the right defense and would not accept any punishment. Dick, who received the news, was also very regretful that he could not send John home in person. At this time, he had only one thought in his mind, which was to kill Kent and avenge John. After he had sorted everything out, he drove his car on the highway and rushed all the way to Kent's house. As soon as Kent entered the door, he was threatened with a gun by him, who had been waiting for a long time. After the two sides made a deal, Dick told the truth that he had also worked in Guantanamo prison. When Kent heard this news, he was not only indifferent, but his expression on his face also gradually twisted. He proposed to play a game of pressure with him, and only those who survived were qualified to leave this house. The two of them got up with a bunch of tools and walked into another bedroom. As the room was filled with screams, the sky was bright, and Dick walked out of the room with a faint shudder. He called the police and claimed that he had killed someone, and the police rushed to the prison and sent him to the prison. Dick was still calm in the prison, and even a little elegant Mary, who learned of the incident, also came to the prison to visit Dick. The two of them put their fingers together against the glass and didn't say much, and he also won the first place in the Texas poker game by hanging up. Successfully won the first place in the game, and Dick's face slowly appeared. This is the luckiest time since he became a fortune teller. Dick, who entered the prison, was not so miserable. The movie ends here with the identity of a fortune teller. In fact, the whole film is described by Dick's autobiography. For the name of the movie of the fortune teller, it is more about Dick's revenge for John Overall. There are fewer descriptions of Texas poker. Through Dick's work in the Guantanamo prison, he described the cruel scene of this prison, then the corruption of the U.S. agency led by John. This made the whole film weak to the description of the fortune teller, but watching the movie again made me have to imagine the real, so-called highest level of the fortune teller that the director wants to describe. Is it a fortune teller? After all calculations are no match for the God who really understands people's hearts and human nature.